let's get to the book review. So the book is fiber fueled, as I mentioned towards the beginning, by Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. I practiced a lot on that name before I got here.
You're crushing it. You're doing
All
good.
further mentions of his name will be Dr. B, just so we're clear.
That's how he refers to himself.
Yeah,
in the book.
so might as well.
So the book uncovers how to transform your health by optimizing your gut microbiome. So just a quick, what is the book? And I'm just kind of reading the description here. This is not what I think of the book necessarily, but a bold new plant-based plan that challenges popular keto and paleo diets from an award-winning gastroenterologist. The benefits of restrictive diets like paleo and keto have been touted for more than a decade, but as we now have Dr. B, he'll illuminate in this groundbreaking book the explosion of studies on the microbiome and how it makes it abundantly clear that elimination diets are in fact hazardous to our health. What studies clearly now show and what Dr. B preaches with his patients is that gut health is the key to boosting our metabolism, balancing our hormones, and taming the inflammation that causes a host of diseases. And the scientifically proven way to fuel our guts is with dietary fiber from an abundant variety of colorful plants. And then my basic plot summary of the book, this is just what you guys could, whatever, is fix your gut, fix everything. Fiber is a major player. I feel like that's what he's trying to get across, just like most anyone else. So we'll get into our critiques and praise. So let's go with, I don't know, let's get some negativity out of the way. Let's go negative of the book from each team member. Kyle, what'd you think negatively on the book?
First. Okay. Okay. Negatives of the book. It's going to be hard for me to do this without talking about the positives first.
We'll come back to positives. I
was prepared to go positive first and then go negative. But
you've got a long list of dislikes, so I feel like you can just go for it.
Well, it's going to be okay.
I'm going to put you on the clock too.
Okay.
We're a minute into your critiques right now.
All right. Yeah, and I haven't even said anything. Okay. Obviously, so this is in case it wasn't clear from what Jerred was talking about. This is all about a plant-based diet, being on a plant-based diet. So basically the guy, Dr. B himself, is a vegan. So he's like 100% plant-based. He doesn't necessarily recommend that everybody go 100% plant-based, but I feel from the way that he wrote the book, it is pretty clear that he actually does think that he thinks that you should be 100% plant-based, even though he doesn't just outwardly say it. Should.
This is the in between the lines.
It's in between the lines that there
Love
is
it.
like,
it was like a backhanded compliment when he talked about meat. That's how it felt every time.
Yeah. So
just his steak story. I mean,
oh my God.
So just to note, I agree with that critique. He doesn't come right out and say it, but then when he talks about meat in one portion of the book, he talks about whether or not you should have like the cleaner meats, the organic, grass-fed, all that stuff or whatever. And he's like, yeah, I guess you should. He's like, but that's asking me whether or not you should have chewing tobacco or smoking cigarettes. And I'm like, all right, dude, like you were unbiased. You were unbiased until that one statement, but I'll get into more, but yeah.
So because of that, to me, he kind of contradicted some of the quite a few of the things that we've covered recently, and just kind of my nutritional philosophy in general. And so I kind of refer to myself as like a nutritional agnostic. I'm not somebody who like sticks to one specific thing, and that's the one thing that's good for everybody. And I don't think that
sounds like you have one thing you don't do though, and that's vegan.
That's vegan. I don't do vegan, right? But anyway. I don't do vegan because it doesn't work for me, but I'm not saying that it doesn't work for other people. I'm not saying it doesn't work for other people. I'm saying that I don't want to. So
there you go. Let's be real.
Anyway,
let's be real.
It doesn't work for me because I don't want to, and I wouldn't be able to stick to it because I don't want to. So
yeah, not a functional work. It doesn't work out in your life.
Right.
Got it.
And I think that's a big piece of nutrition is I feel like you need to enjoy eating. And I think that's what a lot of like fad diets and a lot of just dieting in general, it makes people hate eating. And that's why they don't stick to it, is because they're having to eliminate things and they feel like they have to make a bunch of big changes all at once. And that's not true, but they do that. And then they wind up hating it. And so then they get off of it and they don't see results because they quit because they hate it. And so I just feel like that's anyway. So I just I'm always wary and kind of take it with a grain of salt when somebody clearly thinks that this is the one way that people should do something. And I don't believe that. I think that nutrition is individualized and should be individualized, and what works for one person may not work for another person. So that was kind of my biggest thing. Also, he mentioned in there that that eating this way, like it makes your fitness effortless. He wasn't really clear on what he meant by that. Like, but he used the words effortless fitness, and as he was like touting this way of eating, and I wasn't really clear on what he meant by that, but I just kind of felt that kind of threw up a red flag for me, because like I was like, I don't really know how fitness can be effortless, because like if it's
he
effortless,
means like you're gonna feel so good on the way that you eat that
Like you'll lose weight without working out if you clean your gut, kind of thing, maybe.
Okay.
Well,
not actual fitness.
The fact that he uses fitness to me means that more what Ashley is saying is that it will be like you'll have the energy, and so you'll want to do these things, probably things that none of us struggle with, so we don't quite understand.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, that explains it a little bit for me. So I think I've said enough. I'll pass the buck.
So overall critiques. Who's next, Kyle?
Let's go with Joe. Let's just go ahead and get
all right. So to segue from what Kyle's what he was saying about that, he kind of lacked clarity on a lot of things. There were times where he either glossed over things and didn't say enough detail that I think he should have. One section in particular was when he's talking about whole grains, gluten, lactose, those three things. He just was kind of like, I partially see what he was coming from, saying that, people have demonized these three things once they found that there's some bad parts to it. And he was kind of counteracting, saying, no, there's still good parts to it. But then he was just like, yeah, you should introduce these into your life. And you're like, well, you got any more for me? Like what whole grains? How am I going to find the right ones? Beans, how am I going to cook or prepare the beans? His whole thing on lactose was confusing to me. He went like, milk is good, but it's also bad, and lactose has good things, but then you also shouldn't have dairy. And I was like, where the hell are we going with this, dude? So that was the one thing in particular.
I do think that I remember that part. What I concluded from that was that he was trying to be objective, not subjective about something like dairy. I think he was trying to talk about both sides of like, yeah, they found that some of it is good, but ultimately that we found a lot of it that is bad. But then he doesn't. The reason it gets confusing because he doesn't bring you to an ultimate conclusion. He just kind of is like, here's both sides, moving on, And so
clarity on that was weird because he did try and do both sides of it, but I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure what he was actually trying to say. The whole grain part, I think that was the main one of that, is that you could kind of set people up for failure. And this goes back to our marketing terms discussion. And I looked them up for marketing terms. So for something to be deemed and branded whole grain, a food only needs to have 51% of their grains be whole grains. The rest can be refined, or 8 grams of whole grain per serving, or a lot of them, most don't even get enough, or a lot of them still have more refined grains than whole grains and can still be branded whole grains because most people don't get enough whole grains. So their philosophy is some is better than none. And that's just one thing of like, if people read this and say, oh, I need to get whole grains, I'm going to go to the store and look for that branding of whole grains. But he doesn't actually clarify or say, okay, when you're going to the store, go look for this. This is what you should be wanting with your whole grains. And then even in his little guide, like when his little color chart, it says whole grains. So that was one of them as well, leaving out some information. Beans and legumes, he just says, hey, all these things, good things about legumes and beans. But when you tell somebody that, guess what? They're going to go to the store and buy the can of beans. They're not going to buy the dry beans and soak them like you should. They're not going to cook them in a pressure cooker. They're not going to actually cook them the right way. Soy I won't even get into. I don't know if that might be Ashley's thing, but so that was a big one, is those things that he mentioned. I think he needed to give more about it. Like I could see he has might have some good stances to it, but he just doesn't say enough. Whether he didn't look more into it or not, I'm not sure. Let's see. There was an example that he had from, and I just want to point this out. From, remember the Tanzanian tribe example that he had? There was a indigenous tribe from Tanzania that eats all these vegetables and all these fibers, and they are super healthy. Do you remember the last book we had? They had a tribe from Tanzania who were predominantly meat eaters, the Maasai. Same country, same situation. They're cut off from Western cultures, completely meat diet. So it's just one of those cherry picking. I don't want to say cherry picking information, but it was just one of those examples where, because I mean, you could say the same thing for why we get sick. And this just kind of toots the horns of deep nutrition because of how she executed all of those things. But that's a whole different thing. So some of the examples, that was just an example of some of his examples were a little bit tailored to the point that he was making, which I guess could happen with a lot of books anyway. And then the final one that I'll just end on this one is toward the very end of the book. He was talking about how it was related to his steak story, and he goes through and he was saying how crappy his diet was before, and then he did all this plant stuff and he ate all this fiber, and then he went to the doctor and lost 40 pounds and was like, oh my God, I'm down to my college weight. I haven't weighed this much since college. And he said, all thanks to plants. And I was like, dude, you literally just said you were drinking 2 to 3 Red Bulls a day, eating at Jersey Mike's 2 to 3 times a week. You were super stressed and staying up late. That's not thanks to plants, man. Like, I know there's a big part of it that helped, but like you just boiled everything down to like, hey, plants are going to fix my life. And he might not have meant it that way, but this is just, after a while in this book, his jabs that he takes that we've kind of mentioned started adding up to me, and I just started getting a little bothered by more that he said. But these are just some of the things that if you hear it, I think are misleading. He came off as misleading in a nutshell as to a lot of things that he said and lacked some clarity. But now I'm going to turn it over to Ashley because I should stop.
Don't worry, people. We will get to the praise of the book.
Yes,
we're getting into the good parts. We're getting into the good parts.
Things. Okay.
So I don't really have too many negatives on the book. Because I think when you're reading kind of what we've all alluded to, when you're reading something like this, you have to take it with like, not this guy's one way is everyone's one way. And so what I like to do is read it and what can I take away from this? And then what can I try? But if I am going to critique a little bit, I will say he talks about gluten. And obviously a lot of people know I'm gluten-free, and he gave criteria of why you should go gluten-free. Now, if you have no issues with digesting gluten, and you are eating, sprouted bread or something that is, or like whole grains that, and again, sorry, Joe, I'm just using that term, but that is not processed and refined, then, and if you can process it, then it's fine. But he gave the criteria of if you only had celiac, and I forget what he had one more criteria, like there was only 2 different reasons why you should go gluten-free. But I would argue that there are potential other reasons why sometimes people go gluten-free, and it's doctor recommended, mine is functional recommended. Mine was from a holistic endocrinologist, and it clearly showed that it was causing inflammation with my thyroid. And so I did not agree with that. But it doesn't mean that I'm like, I guess it didn't really infuriate me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I guess that would be my one big takeaway from that. I kind of agree with Joe. I'm in the camp of like, he should have maybe dove into like, these are where you find your whole grain substances and what you should. He kind of talks about it. He talks about brown rice and quinoa and stuff like that. Like he talks about where that should come from when he talks about the grains.
Guarantee if you asked him, he's not going to be like, yeah, the Lucky Charms that says it has whole grains in it.
For sure.
He just lacked clarity, but I guarantee he's not going that direction.
And that's not where I think he should. But unfortunately, if you're reading this book and you have a diet like he does, what are you going to look for? You're going to look for stuff that is saying, whole grains and whatnot. Hopefully our listeners, especially talking about the marketing terms, are going to be a little smarter than that. But yeah, it can be a little bit misleading. Jerred, what are your critiques?
Very minimal. I had just similar to what Kyle said, a pretty hard vegan slant. He tried to hide it. This is going to turn into backhanded praise though, because I've read a lot of vegan books. I'm pretty interested in the vegan diet, not for something that I want to do, but there's not a more popular diet out there that has as much scientific research. So there's no way I can't be incredibly well educated on the vegan diet and work with athletes. Especially I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we might be encountering athletes with a lot of vegan preferences. And since I don't care about your preferences, I don't have a one way fits best. I want to know as much as I can about every area. So I feel like of the vegan books I've read, he did his best job to remain objective, but it's kind of like if you had a religious person who had a very clear religious stance and they tried to write an objective book, but you're going to see that it bleed behind the lines a little bit, that they have a specific belief in, a religion or a specific religion, even though they tried to remain objective. And I think I'm comparing veganism to a religion because that's how hard people can believe these things at times. But he ultimately probably believes that, being a vegan is the best thing for the planet. It's the best thing for your body. And he had a pretty hard vegan slant. But overall, his takeaway was try and be plant-based 90% of the time, 10% of the time, do whatever you want, which I think is really good. So that was my only critique. Pretty hard vegan slant, but overall, not near as bad as other vegan books that I have encountered. So let's get into some praise for the book. Right now, hopefully everyone's still listening, because if you ended there, you wouldn't read the book. And I absolutely love this book. So let's get into some of the praise for the book. We'll just go in the same order. Kyle, you have anything good to say about this book?
I do. Goodness. I have plenty good to say about the book. One of the things that I really enjoyed is he actually really focuses on eating whole foods. Like that's kind of, I know that he kind of used the same marketing terms that we've talked about and things like that. And again, I just like Joe, I do wish that he had kind of gone a little bit deeper on that. Just for people who this might be the only book that they read about it, and it would have been great to go a little bit deeper on clarifying what he meant by that. But if you read the entire book, it's pretty clear that he's talking about eating whole foods. He's not talking about eating Lucky Charms. He's not talking about he's not even talking about eating Wheaties, you know what I mean? Or anything. Like he's talking about eating whole foods. And so I do like that, because that's pretty much anytime we talk about nutrition on here, that's my takeaway. And I think that's just kind of our philosophy here at Garage Athlete, is you need to eat whole foods. And he also recommends a highly varied diet. He recommends eating a lot of different plants, a lot of different foods. You know what I mean? It needs to be varied. One of his chapters, I think, is called Eat the Rainbow or something like that, just talking about eating different colors, and making your plate colorful because you have different kinds of plants on there. And so eating highly varied diet, plant-based, obviously, and then eating whole foods. I think I really like that. And I also like that he kind of paints it as a lifestyle, especially in the very end of the book. He paints it as a lifestyle, not as a diet. He's like, I'm not giving you a new diet. I'm giving you habitual changes to make, which is something else that we talk about on here a lot. You should be focused on making small changes over time. And he even specifically recommends that, of changing one small thing at a time, instead of just dumping everything and trying trying something completely different, do something small over time and just make those changes over time until you get to what he, as Jerred alluded to, what he recommends is his 90-10, 90% plant-based, 10% whatever you want. Make those small changes to get there, but make it a lifestyle. Don't just make it a diet. Don't think of it as a diet. Think of it as, this is just how I live. And this is what I do to have a fulfilled life and a vibrant life. And this is just the way that I think and the way that I eat, because it matches up with my lifestyle. So I did like those things about the book, is he's not giving you, and even at the end, like it's a 4-week plan that he gives you, you know what I mean? It's not like and it didn't even really seem like typical diet plans that you get. It was pretty much just change small things over time, and until you eventually get to this point where you're 90-10. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that about the book as well. Same order, Joe.
So first, I'll start off with, I guess, a little context. This isn't good or bad, and it's just the fact that we go over all of these different nutrition books. They're always going to have their scope and their lens of what they're directly aimed toward, and this one is gut health. So in the past 2 months, we've done other ones that have directed other things, and there's always good takeaways for them all. So gut health, 100% to a gastroenterologist, and gut health is so awesome and underrepresented, and things that we try and talk about. And there's not a lot of science to go over, like whether it's us looking at studies or books, just because it's still fairly new. I've only read one other book geared toward gut health. I think it was called The Microbiome Solution, and it was also really good and but a really science heavy. So this is a really good, easily digestible book on improving your gut health. And I've tried to help.
No pun intended.
I know, right? It's always happens. I've tried to help a lot of family members of like, hey, you really need to clean up your gut, and you really need to do all these things, but it's hard to kind of convey and take the easiest steps of what to do. It's like normally it's eliminating things, tell them to eliminate stuff and eat clean, but this has really easy practical application. If you just take like the cliff notes of this and like his page of the Eat the Rainbow and get all these vegetables in, is fantastic, easy advice. And how he, like Kyle said, how he puts it to, you need to make these changes for long periods of time, and it's just really easy to get all it in. So a lot of his vegetables, yeah, we've already been eating a long time, so it's good to see that. And it took us several books, a long time to put the diet in that Liz and I eat, and it's all basically in this one. So like in my scramble that I've talked about before, for the last like 3 years, I've had Brussels sprouts and 3 other kinds of vegetables in it. But it didn't come as clear, I guess, is that like this book right here, or his examples of what you should eat and how you should plan out your day. The fact that give yourself 1 point for each different vegetable you have for each day, and have these points add up to a certain amount for a certain period of time, is just a great guidance and great advice, especially to the people out there that might meal prep. And when they meal prep every week, they're making the same 1 or 2 vegetables and the same piece of chicken, and it's like, yep, I'm eating the same thing every day for lunch for 5 months, 5 years, because I know the macros of it and I'm fine. But that's not any diversity. So this is an easy and good way to incorporate those. And he does have a couple of decent, as he's going through his examples and stories, have good like caveats going along. I didn't write all of them now because most of the time I'm just listening, but a lot of his caveats to all of his examples were good as well. Now I'm going to go over to Ashley.
So I'm in the camp of, I love this book. I think it's great. I mean, the fact that it got our team to even talk about it for the last 3 days on our group chat. I mean, it clearly has got us thinking, and obviously there was positives and negatives to it, but I think that's the whole point. Like, we needed to focus on fiber and what Joe was talking about and how that affects our gut. I love the way he explains what microbes are and bacteria. And bacteria is not necessarily a negative thing. I think when people hear the word bacteria, they think it's a bad thing. And he describes like what happens when your bacteria is, in sync versus in whack. And then what that does to you and how that even affects your body, like even your brain, like brain fog and all sorts of issues that you have can relate to your gut. And then I agree with Joe and Kyle, the variety that he talks about. He gives you F goals at the very end. I love that he talks about that it is a growth mindset, that you, again, have to start slow. And he talks low and slow is what he said. He's not expecting you to just dive right in. So kind of what Joe was saying, just take something that you don't normally eat. Like me, I was like, broccoli sprouts? What are broccoli sprouts? And he talked about that, but yeah, or like last night, Jerred posted a picture of him eating beets. I'm like, man, when's the last time I've eaten some beets? Like how, and you just need to, what Joe said, like kind of get out of the box and, try something new, whether that be the vegetables or just variety within your meals. So my takeaways, I guess, from this are for our garage gym athletes listening is maybe not, I'm not saying go vegan, but maybe focus on the vegetables and like your servings of vegetables that you get. So for me, I have a functional nutritionist, and one of my goals is getting 2 servings of vegetables per meal per day. So that's 6 total servings of vegetables. And then kind of plan your meals around that, then add your, meat that is not processed, your whole grains, whether that be rice, quinoa, potatoes. And that's the other thing I loved. He talked about like, we always put these things in these camps, good food, bad food. And it's like, he's trying to eliminate that. Like, we need to get out of this mindset. Like, it's not just good and bad, different foods do different things to your body. Yeah, I could talk a whole lot more about this book, but just for time's sake, I'll let Jerred go next.
Oh yeah. So overall, I think he did a phenomenal job. I kind of mentioned this to you guys, and I'll just say it on the podcast. Like Emily and I have picked up a lot of gut health tactics and strategies over the years, but it's been like here and there, and he hit on like every single one of them in the book. And so, yes, gut health is insanely important. So I think everyone should read this book for that reason alone. There's not a lot of information. I think he mentioned some sort of stat about like how 80% of the research has been done in the last couple of years. Like, of all the studies that exist on gut health have been done in the last couple of years prior to the 60 years before that, on the first published study. And so we're learning a lot about gut health and how important it really is. And I think that this is only going to explode even more over the next couple of years. So getting your gut health in check is a major deal for athletes. And I've never, like, to be honest, I didn't know jack about fiber. Like the only information in my brain about fiber was how it may not have as much of an insulin response and like net carbohydrates and things like just like real base level information on fiber. So I've never had a deep dive on fiber before, and how beneficial it can be to your overall health. And so I think it's just a really, really solid book. And I just kind of want to talk about how I'm processing nutritional information these days, because I think we've all heard that saying, like, if all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, something like that. It's called the law of the instrument. And it's a cognitive bias that involves like an over reliance on a familiar term. So Bickman, he studies insulin. His book is about insulin. Insulin is the key. Sugar Crush, the dude amputates people's feet because they had diabetes. Obviously, his answer is get rid of sugar. This guy, he's a gastroenterologist. Gut is the answer. And I'm not saying he's wrong, but that's obviously what he's going to do. Kate Shanahan, oils, inflammation are killing you. Oils are the thing. Everyone has their one thing, right? And so what I'm really trying to look at, if we're just talking about like Venn diagrams, I'm only paying attention to the intersection of what all these people are saying. I don't really care what anyone is saying. I only care about the intersection of what everyone is saying. And so this is where the Venn diagrams start to overlap. And where the Venn diagrams are overlapping for me from everything that I'm reading, fruits and vegetables. Not a lot of debate there unless you're carnivore. Carnivore people are making ridiculous arguments that there are chemicals in plants that are killing us. I just can't get on board. Maybe I'll be proven wrong one day in 150 years after I'm dead. But right now, I don't think that'll happen. Fruits and vegetables. 1, 2, fasting. For some reason, everyone in almost every camp is starting to agree with fasting to some degree. Not aggressive fasting, but like just a digestive break at a minimum. Almost every book is starting to agree with that. Gut health. I think in every circle, everyone is saying that that's okay. Refined oils, bad oils, that's kind of in there from like Kate Shanahan, where that was her main thing, but I feel like everyone's starting to agree with that. And then the one that everyone agrees with is anything not in moderation, in excess. Well, like if it's in excess, it's probably bad. And it doesn't really matter what it is. Like, yeah, carrots are good. 100 carrots a day, probably bad. 2,000 calories for you, probably fine. 5,000 calories for you, probably not good. These are the things, the 5 that I came up with, having read a lot of nutrition books. That's where things are starting to intersect for me, and I'm okay with all of those things. And I'm dairy free, so I'm probably vegan like 3 or 4 times out of the month, and I don't even realize it, because when you eliminate dairy, you're danger close to vegan. Like, it's like if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, and the only thing that I kind of just like lost interest in eggs. Like, I'm just not eating a lot of eggs. So the only animal source I really have now is meat. So if I have like a meatless dinner or something like that, or it just didn't pop up, like I'm vegan that day on accident. That doesn't happen to most people. But yeah, like that's why I'm not like so anti-vegan, just because I feel like I'm so damn close to it anyway, other than like 1 serving of meat probably a day, maybe 2, depending on the day. And so I don't think it's necessarily a bad approach. And a thought-provoking question I had with Emily after we went through this book was, if we had to pick one diet for the rest of our lives, and the options are ridiculously hardcore strict in ketosis keto or vegan, which one would we pick? And we both would pick vegan over keto any day of the week, because I think keto is that's about as extreme as you can get, right? And so is vegan. If you were to choose between paleo and vegan, it's not easy for me, because I think that paleo does some stuff incorrectly. And there's so many like variations of paleo now. Like there's, oh, well, those grains are okay because we were wrong in the first place. And dairy is actually okay if it's fermented because we were wrong in the first place. Like, I don't like the whole direction paleo's gone. It's too convoluted. I feel like the diet's almost lost my respect, even though a lot of the principles I agree with, of like, let's eat fruits and vegetables, clean meats, and these things. But some of the things that they wanted to exclude at the beginning, maybe they shouldn't anymore. It's kind of like if CrossFit tries to backpedal on high intensity one day. Yeah, you shouldn't be doing that every day. It's like, well, okay, that's literally the definition of what you do, but that's fine. So anyway, yeah, I think it's a great book. Let's get into our rating, where we can jump into the workout. So on a 1 to 5 barbell rating, fractional plates allowed, Kyle, where'd you end up with this book?
I'm gonna give it 3.5 barbells.
All right.
Just because I think there are some things in it that were like I talked about, just the kind of hard vegan slant, and I just stay away from anything that's like trying to tell me this is the one way, and that was in there a little bit, and it contradicted some other things. But I do think the overall premise is good, and people should listen and pay attention and implement. Listen, pay attention, and implement. You do need to eat your veggies, so go out there and do it.
Joe.
4 out of 5 for me. One of the things that I thought of as Ashley was talking, and that was another section that I thought was really awesome, and also goes in line with the marketing terms that I talked about, was the pre, pro, and postbiotic section, because probiotic is like the hot topic word or hot word that's going on everything, but most of that stuff isn't going to work anyway. So that was a really good section as well. 4 out of 5. Gut health is fantastic to get right. Just, kind of sift through some of his jabs and clarity issues.
Ashley.
I'm gonna go 4.25 then, since you did 4 out of 5.
That just makes it worse.
I love my fractional plates. No, it was a really great book, and I think great takeaways overall. And like we said, really simple but not easy to implement, I guess. Lots of simple ways to do it and take variety. But yeah, Jerred, what's yours?
I'm going to give 5 barbells, bring it in strong.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think I don't really care so much about the jabs. That doesn't offend me personally. And here's my take on like the individualized nutrition. We take that stance as a company, and that's what we believe. Like, you should individualize your nutrition. But I'm hoping that there's a day where there is a right answer to what you should be doing. And I'm not saying that will be vegan, but I would love for them to continue to do research and find out, yes, it's okay to eat fish and a lot of fruits and vegetables, and there are a lot of studies backing up that exact statement, things like that. But I'd love to keep diving down that road. The only thing I know for a fact is what my diet looks like today will change, and my opinions on nutrition will continue to change. And I won't have I do this because I've always done it mentality ever. If we find something out, like we were having these discussions about meat, like processed meat, there's nothing promising about processed meat coming out, like, at all, period. So if you're like, you want to go crush some sausage and bacon or whatever, that's fine. Like, keep doing it. Try and buy the healthiest version of that thing you can, but still, it's not, the science is not leaning in your direction. So you're making that choice because you just enjoy it and it's comfortable for you. And so you have to start making some hard choices in nutrition. And a lot of these things will keep popping up, and you have to get the perspectives from everywhere. You can't get the perspectives from a paleo guy. You can't get the perspectives from a vegan guy. You have to get it from everywhere, and you'll land somewhere in these intersection points about what's probably okay, but we're not going to know for sure. So that rounds us out at an average of 4.2 for the team, which is listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.